Okay, I'm assuming since I'm live, yeah, guys, Big Daddy's just having a bit of issues. He's got load shedding right now, which is meant to. Yeah, what he said, technical difficulties due to load shedding. Yeah, Sita, I think just give us a thumbs up or come back in whenever you're able to. But just on my end, I am unable to actually pull anyone else in. I think that responsibility is delegated to you. In the meantime, I'm going to try see if I can, bring back your rehearsed introduction here. So this is the Big Daddy Liberty Show, 8 p.m. You know it to be right after your carte blanche session. On the screen right now is Martin van Staden. Say hi.
How's it, everyone?
Yeah, and how you doing, Martin?
Yeah, no, good. I have power.
Yeah, there's that saying that you don't know what you have until it's gone. I think that's exactly what Sikle is going through right now. Yeah, next to Martin is Ernst van Sale. That's the Conscious Caracal. How you doing?
Oh, well, Koketso, nice to see you again. And also, I've been checking the lineup that we have here for tonight, so looking forward to the conversation.
Oh, well, yeah,
Koketso,
awesome.
nice to see you again. And also, I've been checking the lineup that we have here for tonight, so looking forward. Yeah, so such a good intro, you have to hear it twice.
Yeah, Gabriel Crouse, how you doing, man?
Very good, Koketso. How's it? I'm amazed sometimes that we can do anything in South Africa, given all the obstacles that we face. But I think that the sort of garage band liberty from the midst, from the fog spirit is very strong. And I just want to say that it was nice to see Sitle was trying to keep the show going in the dark by lighting some candles. It was very romantic.
Very romantic. Yeah, improvisation is a skill. And lastly, so we've never met, Phume, but maybe give us an intro of who you are, what you do, etc.
Hello, everybody. Is my sound good?
Perfect.
Fantastic. I'm Phume Mashigo, and I am a communications person, and I do a little bit of political sniping on Cliff Central on Thursday mornings.
Yeah, okay,
on
awesome.
The burning platform.
On the burning platform.
I remember the experience well because I was on a burning platform with you and Gareth, where I went to talk about the Racism is Not the Problem campaign that we were just launching at the time from the Institute. And as part of that, we were talking about our surveys where we've asked people, what are the big problems that you face? And we get a whole long list of issues. And racism is there. 2% think it's a top priority, but most people thought that there were much bigger issues. Anyway, Gareth then obviously referred back to that a few weeks later, and then goodbye Nando's. Anyway,
Yeah, I think
good to see you again,
this.
Phume.
I think this is the full panel for tonight. We've got everyone here except for the big man himself. Got quite a bit to cover, but of course there is an admission fee. That is clicking that like button. Give that button a lovely little smash there. Spread the word as well. Do what you got to do on your social media, etc. And I think we should probably get the conversation started. Since we're on the topic of politics here. Truck drivers actually went ahead and did a blockade of the N3. The N3 being the main route really between I'd say KZN, all of our main ports in KZN, and it being the main vein that actually brings goods in and out of, again, economic centers, that is Johannesburg, Pretoria and the like. So truck drivers actually went ahead and blockaded the N3 there in protest. It's very difficult to find out the actual reasons why from some of the media, of course. You have to do a little bit of digging to find out why they're actually protesting. But the common belief here is that they're still on their campaign against what seems to be grand ignorance of employing actual South Africans, or I'd say the local populace, in terms of vocation in truck driving. That's really driving goods in and out of the country, across the country and the likes. So that seems to be their main protest. And as usual, nothing gets done about it until there's some form of economic impact or infrastructural damage, arson and the like. This time around, truck drivers really putting the hurt on the economy and getting the ear of the minister by actually blocking the N3 and preventing the movement of not just goods and product, etc., but also people. I know someone who was actually stuck out in Durban and couldn't come back to Joburg for quite a few hours because of this blockade. So Phume, let me start with you here. What are the actual political implications regarding something like this being done, and why does it actually take such action before we can get someone like Begicele to actually come to the front and address serious crimes? And not just that, but even at a labor level, where's the labor core in cabinet? Why aren't they addressing this issue, which keeps coming up over and over again? And what could be done to better the situation?
Okay, so this has actually been going on since, I think, just after 2010. The last time, apparently, that the truck drivers did have, and I listened in on an interview with the spokesperson for the Truck Drivers Association, that they had an engagement with the minister was 2014, and they have been waiting for the minister to come back to them. Durban is not only South Africa's busiest port, but it is actually Africa's busiest port. And that vein on that N3 is an incredibly important. Is that Sihle coming back?
That's him fixing himself up.
Sihle is going to make the biggest comeback since Lazarus.
But I think carry on while we're basically.
Let's not be distracted.
We see you and we hear you. I was expecting that. I was expecting
Perfect.
You hear me.
How's the Koketso Resane Liberty show going?
You might as well take over the show, Sihle. You might as well hang up your cap and give it over to the next generation.
Yo, people, my apologies for that. It has been a very terrible evening of load shedding, and it's knocked everything out of sync. I'm sure Koketso has held it down and done the proper introductions. You have a banger of a panel of folks tonight, but I'm being rude. My name is Sihle Ngobese, aka Big Daddy Liberty. You're watching Liberty and Friends, your Sunday evening premium viewing. This is where we look at the news week that was and provide analysis and opinion that you'll hear nowhere else. Good evening, welcome to it. Remember, your only price of admission here on the show, I'm hoping Koketso may have reminded you, is to hit that like button. That's all it really needs. Hit that like button. Do it now. Do it now as you're wondering, what was the show before Big Daddy Liberty came on? Do it now as you're sitting there in confusion. hit that like button. And
Koketso,
remember,
this guy.
for every like button you hit, 30 kids in Africa get fed. That's still not true, but hit that like button nonetheless. Let me do some introductions once again because I'm late to the party. Phume, I'm going to begin with you because you are the new face here. I'm sure you guys have begun the topic. Phume, I don't know if, knowing Koketso, you probably would have phrased the question like this. Phume, tell us a little bit about yourself.
And actually he did. And Koketso, this guy coming on here late and everything, stealing the thunder from your wonderful intro. I'm just gonna leave him out of this. We actually have done we've done the introductions, Sishe, and we were just getting into the meat of the conversation about the N3 blockade. So I'm gonna go back to that.
Perfect. I don't know if the sound issues are on my side. But Phume, your mic seems a little faint. I don't know if I'm the only one experiencing that. But with that being said, let me just maybe do a quick sound check on Koketso. Koketso, good evening, brother.
Yeah, good evening to you. Good evening to everyone who put up with me for a couple of minutes. I hope I didn't disappoint anyone, but here I am.
You were good.
Perfect. Guys, I'm going to ask you to get back straight into that conversation. I'm having the sound issues. But I want to set it out just from my side before I go back into my little troubleshooting mode here. I do want us to begin with the tracking issue because it's such a defining moment once again where it gave some South Africans perhaps a strong sense of PTSD. Why? Now you're seeing a tracking industry, a road network, the N3, major arterial network that links not only KZN, but the Free State and, of course, Gauteng and other provinces, shut down by protesting truck drivers, an ongoing issue that we've been seeing in that part of the world. But the PTSD I referred to was the initial lack of law enforcement as the chaos ensued. And then you saw the potential, and people felt the growing potential of looting once again becoming a prospect in that part of the world. Let me be precise and specific. This is not the first time we've seen the N3 shut down by truckers. We've seen much more violent scenes in fact, for example, at the Ladysmith toll gate where trucks have been burnt. And a wanton disregard for the rule of law. Absolute displays of violence related to, of course, multiple issues, the most prominent being allegedly truck drivers upset at the fact that foreign nationals are employed as truckers in the country. But surely this is not a good enough excuse, pardon me. And surely the wanton violence that we've seen is just simply not good enough when the question most people ask themselves is, where is the police? Where are the police? And that's the question they ask themselves on the Van Ryn impasse, if I can call it that. I don't know how to go to Phume. I don't know if you are maybe still opining on that, but Phume and then Martin.
Well, Sihle, that's exactly what we were talking about. And I was actually about to say that the thing that is stark for all of us to see is, and it's favorite phrase, 9 wasted years. What we are seeing is we're actually seeing what the broken system of our country is. That's what we're seeing. When we see no law enforcement, when we see slow to react, it is actually because over the past 10 years, all areas of our country have been broken by, you guessed it, corruption. And this is why the police aren't there. This is why the police aren't reacting. There's just too much brokenness in the system. And that's what we saw at Van Ryn.
Yeah, and it's one thing to actually note that there's brokenness, right? But again, I'm going to bring it back to the police now. How come we don't actually see any form of action unless there's something drastic like blocking the actual highway in this instance? More often than not, also, you find scenarios where people actually put rocks on the road. This is quite common in Limpopo and Northwest, etc. So why is it that this is actually what it takes to get some form of policing in terms of attending to people's grievances? Maybe I can jump to Martin on this one.
Yeah, sure. I mean, my gut tells me that the police are often more concerned with what looks good optically than with actually doing their job impartially, as the principle of the rule of law requires. So you'll see Bekitele on the beach with police officers ready for the journalists to show them, yeah, look at how we're enforcing these COVID regulations. But they know that taking action against truck drivers with a very important social concern that the government just isn't listening to them, they know that wouldn't sell them. Now, I know the watchers of this show tend to like my views on things like vaccine mandates and so forth, but allow me to be that guy who says that the truck drivers have absolutely no legitimate concerns here. No foreign truck driver has harmed one hair on any of their heads. And I think that the government was probably correct to ignore them. This is one of those areas where the tough shit rule really does apply. And that is, if you can't compete in the market, then you need to just do better, get good. Don't go around saying, no, well, the reason South Africans are unemployed is because those people are employed. That's an economic fallacy. That's nonsense. That's absolutely ridiculous. And now that they would dare use this type of nonsensical, economically destructive behavior to get their way in a little tantrum is terrible. It's the same type of mentality that we have seen with xenophobia in this country. The same economic fallacies being recycled every now and then. They're stealing our jobs. Absolute nonsense. Just do better. And of course, we can't leave this out. The reason that foreigners tend to do so well in South Africa compared to our native South Africans is because there are labor laws that protect South Africans from employment. And that is the reason why so many are unemployed, why it's so difficult to run a business here. So if they really have a gripe with government, I'm here in Pretoria, the union buildings are right there. Go park your trucks around the union buildings, create a nice big wall of trucks around the union buildings. Go to Parliament in Cape Town. Close the parliamentary precinct with your trucks. That is where you should be going, and forcing them to repeal these laws that make it so difficult to prosper economically in this country. Stop blaming other people just trying to get by. Come on, man.
Yeah. So Phume, you mentioned corruption there. Could it perhaps be something on the policy side of things? In exactly what Martin is bringing up, in that actual government policy may be perhaps the catalyst that prevents South Africans from being feasibly employed in a sector such as trucking. What are your thoughts on that? Then I want to jump to Gabriel on this, because I believe he's either got some data or has seen some data specific around the trucking industry in general.
I think that the issue of policy is a little bit of a fallacy, because the problem we have in South Africa is we have an economy that is not growing. So what you see with people who are saying there are not enough jobs, and we have this, we know the statistic of joblessness in South Africa. What we have with that problem is people are now fighting for economic resource. And always when people are fighting for economic resource, it is the poorer people, it is the person down the line from you that they're not going to have a fight with their neighbor who is richer than them. They're going to fight with the person that they can exert power over. But I do think, Martin, that it's a little bit immature to say that they should, if their gripe is with the government, they should be blockading. They should be blockading Parliament, because this is what we also know here in South Africa, is we know that in order for government to do anything, to take notice of you, what people have learned to do is they have learned that you have to burn something. You have to, you have to make everybody's life difficult before government will step up and say something or do something or show up. We know that's what we've learned. That's what we've seen. And that's how they are behaving. That's just.
If I can jump in here.
Yeah.
Burn the union buildings.
So here's I'll start out with an anecdote from the area. I was in Hilton College just before the pandemic, and they had recently had a blockade. Some of the ground staff, gardening staff, had blockaded Hilton, not allowing sort of teachers to come back in, and just before the school season started, so parents and students weren't really involved, but they were about to be blockaded. And this happened in January of 2019, and I was there later in 2019. And I was talking to some of the kitchen staff about why this happened. I asked them, have there been problems at Hilton? They were like, no, generally it's been very nice. And then they said, one of them said, no, but there was this time where we had a strike and then they blockaded and no one could come in and go out. And I said, why did this happen? And most of the kitchen staff were ladies. And so they started out by saying, no, it's those men. They were just too angry. And then I said, okay, men, women. But like, what were they angry about? They said, you know what's happening? They've started to hire foreigners. And I said, sure. And because of my experiences in KZN, I know that foreigners usually means people from Lesotho, because that's what's right close by. I said, were they hiring Sutus from Lesotho? They said, no. They were hiring from Pietermaritzburg. This was their idea of foreign, right? Is the jobs in Hilton are for people in Hilton, or maybe Howick West, maybe bordering around there in the Umgeni region, but really Hilton jobs are for Hilton locals. If you're hiring from Pietermaritzburg, this is very, very terrible. And I thought it was a striking insight. And then we kept talking about it because I laughed and they all laughed. And I was like, is this a joke or are you guys being serious? And then they talked about who the recent staff appointments were that had irritated people. And there were South Africans, born, ID card, green mamba, all of that. But they came from outside of our community. And I do think that there's an interesting and underexplored aspect of what the complaints often amount to. And part of the reason that I bring this up is because the data we have, and I don't have it at my fingertips, but in 2019, we had far over one, if you look at all of the blockages on major arteries coming from truckers, it was like more than one a week. Then if you look in the construction industry, which is connected to the logistics industry, we had almost one a day reported incident of construction mafiosa kind of forcing either employers or staff workers to kind of bend to the will of the people. And it struck me as very disturbing. It's the kind of thing that people in construction or in logistics know very well, but it's not the kind of thing that gets a lot of airtime. And basically what it is a mafiosa system that we have seen in America during the Prohibition era and afterwards for many decades, that we've seen in Mediterranean Europe. It's not unusual when the rule of law dissolves for what Martin describes and what Phume describes to take place, which is that people get their own way by applying force at a very localized level. And that can mean like I was on a construction site in a township on the East Rand of Johannesburg, where the construction manager had just been burnt out of his home because he refused to hire some ANC cadres. And the ANC local councillor had actually told the police not to investigate this matter because they said this guy is like a recalcitrant and you shouldn't be following it up. He wasn't hiring our people. Again, he was hiring foreigners, but hiring foreigners meant he was hiring people from Mpumalanga. So when you're in the mob, when you're in the mafia, a foreigner is someone. You're in Brooklyn, a foreigner is someone from Queens. You're in the Soprano family. A foreigner is someone who's in the Cavalieri family.
Right.
So in that sense, I've got a lot of suspicion, like Martin, for attributing this to an actual genuine economic interest that's just. It strikes me as very unjust. But I think that maybe the connection between the 2 points is that as long as the policies are what they are, we're going to have flat economic growth, no economic growth. That's where the policy comes in. Why are we not making money? Why have we lost a decade and we're set to lose another decade? It's not because people don't want to work. There's lots of people who want to work. It's because we've got crap policies that are making it difficult to work and accumulate property and deal with the mob in a way that gets you to a win-win value add free market kind of situation. And where Phume, I completely agree, is right, is that as long as the rule of law is not being well implemented, people know that the only way to get anything that they want is by setting stuff
burning
on fire.
something down. Yeah. So last one here before I hand it back to our host, Ernst, maybe bring us home on this one here. So there's two issues here which has been brought up in that. Firstly, is it a cultural one in that my neighbor is my friend, but my neighbor's neighbor is not my friend? And then secondly, and this is actually being brought up in the comments as well, in that how do we find ourselves in a scenario where you have people who are willing to leave their country and go contribute to someone else's economy, in this case ours, South Africa's that is, but that same level of dedication to actually contributing to their own economies doesn't exist. Where's the actual fix for that? Is this something that is, is it a niche problem, or is this something that we can observe at large, depending on which corner of the country that you're in?
Yeah, well, Koketso, I think if you look at it in a utopian way, a world without borders, everyone would just pretty much congregate around all the centers where the most opportunities are. And that would also not be ideal because those centers would then be overwhelmed. But I think when it comes to South Africa, there is still an importance of law and order. I don't think I would find any way to excuse illegal immigration to South Africa. I think there are legal systems where people can go through and channels to come to South Africa. And I think that's important. I do think that the organizations and firms and companies that are hiring illegal immigrants need to be held accountable because they're breaking the law, and law and order is important at the end of the day. And we can't just have a free-for-all where anyone can just walk over a border as porous as a river and come to South Africa. I do think people need to go through the legal channels that are there. It is breaking the law of the country where you're coming to. And if you are going to immigrate to a country, I'm not a person that says you have to completely ban immigration. But at the same time, if you're going to immigrate to a country, you adhere to the laws of that country. And if you're immigrating to that country illegally, you're breaking the country's laws on the first day that you arrive. So I also don't think unregulated immigration is a good thing and something that should be applauded. I think adhering to the laws of a country is still important, and coming to a country legally needs to be emphasized in this matter. When it comes to a country like South Africa with an unemployment rate close to 40%, I mean, it's not surprising when you get these types of protests. I think they're going to multiply in the years coming. I don't think this is going to be an isolated event. I think it's going to become very regular where we're going to see this type of ire directed at foreign workers within South Africa. I think if those workers are here legally, came through all the legal channels, I don't think there should be any problem with them, and they should be protected. If we get to the situation where these protests start getting out of hand, I think the police need to step in and do their job. I don't think lawlessness needs to reign. I think the police are there for a reason. Rather than policing people on the beaches, they should be actually laying down the law in situations like this where people's lives are being affected, people's lives are at risk, situations can get very dangerous. We saw back in 2008 with the xenophobic attacks in South Africa that these types of protests or even actions can get very dangerous for people. So I think this is more than ever where the police need to step in, and they need to be hard in regards to the law and order. But at the same time, I do think there's a larger conversation that needs to be had. We can't just write off anyone with these types of concerns of, they're just being idiots or they're just being bigots. I think there are genuine concerns that warrant a broader conversation. I don't think these are just people that are just doing it because they love disrupting and they love destroying things and they love disrupting other people's lives. I think that would also be a misconception. So I think in regards to this, there is a broader conversation to be had regarding our border security and making sure that people that come to South Africa come here legally. I don't think a porous border is a good thing. I don't think illegal immigration is a good thing, and that's why a strong border is required, and that's why there shouldn't be any excuses for just saying, well, it's just a free-for-all, anyone can come here and there's no type of regulation. I do think every country needs to have the right to have their hand on the tap and to regulate that type of flow coming in, not to say that it's ideal to just completely turn off the tap.
Can I just jump in to say a small thing, which is that I agree the border needs to be well regulated, but that's not all. if you go to Home Affairs, specifically in Gauteng, where a lot of the migrants get processed, you'll find waiting lines and incompetent bureaucrats that make it very difficult for legitimate processing of migration status. And the easiest way, and you can, by the way, the South African Migration Project, SAMP, which is run from the University of Toronto, has great data on this. It's appalling. I mean, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people with prima facie irregular engagement with Home Affairs. And the reported evidence seems to be that the best way to get a legal status is not by actually jumping through the legal hoops, because the bureaucrats are so useless they don't even know what they are and they're screwed up. The best way is just to bribe your way through.
Gabriel,
So
but we have to also
that's a problem.
understand the fact, but we also have to understand the fact that immigration is not just a willy-nilly experience. You know, Zimbabweans coming across the border into South Africa, there is no such thing as economic refugees. Simply because your country is not working and the economy in your country is not working is not a legitimate reason to want to be an immigrant in another country. You can be a political immigrant, you know, you can be a political refugee, you can. But just, you know, you are a waiter. You don't bring a special skill into the country. You're coming across to be a waiter, to be a domestic worker. That is problematic within itself, and that is why, you know, when you look at all of the hoops that people have to jump through, they seem to be hoops that make it impossible for people to come through into this country. But actually, for those individuals, it should be difficult for them to come into the country because they're not bringing any special skills. They must work to make their country also
so
work.
Phume, so let me give a very different kind of example. My partner is a German citizen, and she's been in South Africa since before the pandemic. And her visa is automatically 3 months. And then you're supposed to apply to get a visa update, and then it's an extension for 3 months, and you spend 2,000 Rand, and it's fine. Because of the pandemic, there were automatic extensions. They not once has Home Affairs or the Department of Foreign Relations or the presidency or any government department had accurate information on what those extensions are going to look like. What has happened literally every 3 months is that they say you have to apply, you spend the extra money, and then on the day after the deadline, they say, no, we're automatically extending the deadline. So anyone who didn't apply gets the automatic extension, but anyone who went and sat in the queue and paid the money, they also get the extension. That is not a big deal. We just had to go through it again on Thursday. It's like, it's 4 hours in the morning and 2,000 Rand. It's not a big deal for us. It's an inconvenience, but it's a small example of the irrational nature of Home Affairs implementation. So I'm not saying that the rules are that make it difficult to jump through those hoops. Keep those rules. I'm totally with Ernst. I'm totally with you. You must have proper borders. You must try and protect your labor markets. I'm just saying on top of that, there's a layer of corrupt and inept administration, which is borne out like by this bourgeois example, which is kind of casual, but is borne out much more seriously by the South African Migration Project's research into what it's like to be a proper refugee or an immigrant who's got the meeting the right criteria to get the application through. And I literally have taken a person from Home Affairs in Johannesburg to Pretoria who was getting a PhD in molecular biology at Wits University, who had a letter from the minister from the Department of Trade and Industry chief saying this guy has a special skill, please grant him his visa. And they still denied him his visa because they didn't know what they were doing. Because they first said you must bring this form, then he brought that form, then they said, no, we told you to bring the wrong form, but now your thing is lapsed, so you have to go back to Zambia. This guy was a PhD. He was properly skilled. And I mean, he was like, dude, I don't know what to do anymore. So I was like, well, we're driving to Pretoria to the next head office. Let's see if we can try there, catch a lift. And that's where he told me a sob story. So these are just little bits of anecdote. But I think the underlying point is that administering law and order means having good rules and then the bureaucrats sticking to those rules.
Guys, I'm going to have to jump in here for a moment. I'm hoping you can hear me because I can't hear myself. Okay, perfect. Hey, I'm having that kind of evening. Good evening, folks. Welcome to it. We have just crossed a 40-minute mark. This is Liberty and Friends, or I was debating earlier on it as to whether it is because of all the technical glitches. I hope you're enjoying the show. I know Koketso is holding it down as a honorary co-host tonight on the show. I'm not seeing my likes where they should be, folks. Just because I haven't been here doesn't mean I don't have my 50% engagement. Get those likes up, people. Hit that like button right now, especially if you're enjoying this conversation. This is Liberty and Friends. Guys, I know I have to move us on conversation-wise, which is sad because I have no idea what everybody else said. But anyway, it has been an interesting week, though, in terms of some of the other issues. I'm going to come to the fuel price, guys, because I really want to have this conversation in the context of the standard of living that South Africans are ever increasingly see drop in this country. You know, there are people in this country who not more than 2 years ago would have considered themselves relatively middle class and, okay, not only okay, but doing well. But now are maybe finding themselves becoming even some of the dependents of governments that they never thought there'd be. And why? Because of lockdown in the first instance, which has eviscerated millions of jobs, which on top of what was already a stagnant economy. That's really what it is at the stage, a stagnant economy on top of what already were bad policies by the ANC government. That individual now, that South African, who I like to describe as the faith, flag, family, and freedom type South African, finds himself 2 years later dealing with the economic headwinds of a country with, on the one hand, bad economic policy, number two, in a global environment where things are not looking very good. And one good example of that, of course, was the fuel price, which shot up on numerous occasions. I think we've seen a 40% increase since the beginning of the year in the price of fuel in this country. That's a massive, massive, Gabriel, I'm going to come to you. That's a massive increase for a family who already are struggling to make ends meet to try and actually pay for.
So if you look internationally, one of the most common data findings is how people distribute their income with logistics, housing, food, holiday, leisure, entertainment, and schooling, health, and so on. The international benchmark is that people spend less than 10% on travel, on logistics, on getting to work and back and the like. Now, I don't like the phrase apartheid spatial planning because I think it often gets invoked like so many other phrases to do with our past. Then it's like you can't solve the problem, you must just beat your chest. We do have a serious problem in this country that comes from apartheid spatial planning, that comes from public transport being a figment of someone's imagination. The train tracks have all been ripped up and so on and so forth. South Africans, on average, spend 20% of their income on domestic travel, on logistics. We have like the highest on record spend on just moving your body, relying on petrol to get you to work or to get you to the grocery store or so on. So fuel price multipliers are well known around the world. One of the problems is anytime you buy an apple or a bag of pop or a pizza, there was petrol that took all of those ingredients to come together and then petrol to get it to your house. So if the petrol price goes up, so is your basic living food cost. But in this country, so is your cost of getting to work. This is one of the most insane, like to imagine in this country that the government, instead of subsidizing fuel, is going to be taxing it at the rates that it's taxing it, is just punching the poor in the teeth. Mm-hmm. I think that it irritates people because it should irritate people. It's really counterproductive. And what's the solution? It's to scrap the tax. It's so straightforward. This is one of the easiest taxes to scratch. And
absolutely.
Yes, we've got budget problems. This is the kind of thing that will really pay for itself. Like that's often used as a myth. Cut this tax. Okay, if you cut the tax on billionaires, it'll pay for itself. No, it won't. If you cut the tax on basic fuel levies, the employment effect that will have, ask an ordinary South African, and the government's YES program has done this. What is the hardest obstacle to getting a job? It's getting enough money to go and find a job. Because you need
Almost
to pay a tax.
30% of that fuel price, almost 7 rand of the 21 rands that we're paying for fuel price goes towards taxes and levies and RAF.
Actually, to
scrap it.
finish that. I just wanted to say, no, it's actually it's worse than that. I saw the other day. So the basic fuel price is 9 rand, about 9 rand 30 cents. Then other levies is 4 rand. Road accident fund is 2 rand. Petrol levy is 4 rand. That's I mean the petrol price could be close to 10 rand if you just take out all the other levies, road accident fund, petrol levy. And the thing is, it's not even as if the justification for these types of levies like the road accident fund is actually going towards those sources. That's the facade. That's what it's being held up as. But it's just going into the pockets of more politicians. It's being used for other things. It's really not even, it's not even as if you can make that justification. Well, at least the taxes are going towards something road related. In many of the cases, it's not even going to something even prosperity related or even in a good related to the good. It's going just into some politician's pocket, and that's what we're seeing here. And I'm completely with Gabriel there in regards to the effect that this would have on the South African economy if we just had a competitive fuel price, and a fuel price where people can pay a reasonable price just to get around. I mean, the whole modern economy is built around logistics. It's built around being able to get around. And the thing is, what a lot of people don't realize is that, yes, the fuel price affects how much it costs you to get from point A to point B, but it also factors into every product that you buy, because every product needs to be transported. Our railway system is non-existent, so every product needs to be transported by road. That means, and it's not just, and it doubles up on itself, because firstly, the flour needs to be transported, then the eggs need to be transported, then these ingredients need to be combined, bread needs to be made, and that bread needs to be transported. So everywhere the fuel price comes in, and then also you have the additional effect of all these very heavy trucks completely driving South Africa's roads into oblivion. And that's what the fuel levy is supposed to be going towards, repairing roads. But the whole system affects the roads in that way.
They fucked up the rail system.
Yes.
They fucked up the rail system.
And I must come in there because it's a very interesting tale that Ernst paints here. Insofar as it's almost the classic case of appearances versus reality. The appearance, of course, is politicians telling you, oh, well, we need to have these taxes and levies on the fuel price, because if it wasn't for them, what would we do? Who would build the roads? They'll tell us, And then now you have a guy like Big Daddy Liberty who then says, okay, cool. Let's take a drive, as I usually do, from Johannesburg to Newcastle. There's a section, guys, of road. Once you leave the N3, and you turn off into some of the smaller arterial roads that then lead you to Newcastle, where the road literally just
N68.
It just disappears. It becomes a gravel road that is not meant to be a gravel road, where instead of there being potholes, there are hints of tar, rather, and then it sort of picks up at some stage. And you sit back and, we laugh about this, but this is the kind of road that is a lifeline to various communities across the country. The very same roads that we're told the funding is ring-fenced, or rather made available through these fuel levies. And again, another little quirky thing you'll see, Phume, I'll come to you just now. Another quirky thing you'll see is, you leave South Africa, you drive into Swaziland, you were paying 20 rand a litre in let's say, the last Mpumalanga town before you drove into Swaziland. The moment you get into Mbabane and you want to fuel up the tank, you have a look at their meter and it says 9 rand 80, 10 rand. A liter for petrol. It really does. It grates your, what, as the expression goes, Phume.
Sihle, I know that road very well. We were speaking earlier about corruption, and this, for me, is one of the biggest atrocities of what corruption can do, because on the road, you actually see the different, because driving down to KZN, driving down to Durban, or even into Newcastle, those places, you drive through Gauteng, you drive through the Free State, you drive through a bit of Mpumalanga before you get to KZN. The Free State roads, the part of the road that is supposed to be maintained by the Free State, is so horrendous all along. And there is a stark line. As soon as you cross out of the Free State, you're just like, young Ace. This is why
Yes,
Ace should be thrown
exactly.
in jail. No, seriously, you see it, and it's in those areas that you begin to see how much corruption plays a part in almost every single thing that is happening and going wrong in South Africa. You see it in stark differences in places like that. Then you're just like, every time I drive on that road, I am just like, Ace should be thrown in jail and somebody must throw away the key.
And again, Martin, the age-old question, isn't it? Who would build these roads if we didn't pay those fuel levies, Martin, and all that tax to Uncle Uncle Cyril and his administration? Who would build these damn roads?
Yeah, the exact same people are building them now. Contrary to popular belief, the Cyril Ramaphosa doesn't don a construction worker's outfit and go and build the roads. He hires professional contractors from the private sector to do that for him. And of course, that wouldn't change just because the fuel price is brought down significantly and government doesn't get its piece of the pie anymore. The fact of the matter is that communities, I think, are very eager to probably provide their own roads where there are none at this stage. If you look at, for instance, the townships of South Africa, there are virtually no well-tarred roads there. So the common response to this is, yeah, but look, it's going to be wealthy developments having tarred roads if you take away the extra e-tolls or extra fuel levies, but the poor areas are going to remain unserviced. They're not serviced now, so that's really not going to change anything. The only thing that's going to change is that the corrupt politicians aren't going to have this additional stream of funds to fund their lavish lifestyles, but you will see communities at long last having this extra money that they save on fuel, really vying for themselves, defending for themselves there. AfriForum does great work in this respect in Centurion nowadays, fixing potholes in that area. That's where the solution lies. I mean, I don't see the ANC getting off its corruption train. We now had our little chance with the great reformer Cyril Ramaphosa, probably the best the ANC has to offer at this stage, and he himself could not bring about the end of corruption and the great renewal of government. It's not going to happen. Banish the thought. Be very be optimistic about communities filling the gap, and they won't fill the gap now because in many respects it's illegal to fill that gap. There's a lot of uncertainty. Will government come? Will it not come? Let's do exactly what Gabriel says. We cut those taxes out entirely. You only pay for the fuel. Customs, all that noise goes out of the window. You get pure, nice fuel from our Arab allies, and you use the money that you have now that you would have paid for taxes to put into community initiatives. Now, that might be utopian thinking, but unfortunately, that is the lot that we are stuck with in South Africa going forward. It's not going to get better in the short term. It's going to get worse. And I would much rather see communities empower themselves to fill some of these gaps. And then just a last point. It's funny. Everything we're going to be discussing here now has to do with policy. It's virtually all of it. The first liberals, when they came up with the so-called social contract, came up with it specifically because they had to defend themselves from other people. They wanted the state to protect them from other people violating their rights. Now, that Leviathan has been totally turned around on us. Now it's the state that's become the problem, and virtually none of the issues that we face as South Africans, including this one, is to be blamed on circumstance, the economy, or other people. It's usually always the state with some policy thing right there. That's the source of our trouble. So it's very interesting, and it's something to be aware of. Politics is the source of all of our suffering at this stage in South Africa.
I mean, I can't disagree with that. As I really look at time, guys, and I want us to move on to another thing. But Koketso, before I do that, there's another part of the conversation here which we often forget, which is, it stupefies me how politicians can hold on to the taxes on fuel when at the same time with a forked tongue, they'll be the first to tell us, oh no, they'll say, we want to encourage poor people to be able to enjoy a higher standard of living, and we want to encourage entrepreneurship. Now, even as I say this, there is an industry in this country which literally services mostly South Africans who are at the most lower echelons of the income bracket, i.e. the taxi industry in this country. You would think perhaps with a government that claims to be pro-black, claims to be pro-entrepreneurship, that for example, if it's not going to eliminate the tax for everybody, it might eliminate the tax for the transport sector, let's say, so that the prices for those who are at the lower end of the echelon, those who take public transport, would be considerably cheaper. We don't even see that sort of innovation from the so-called Mr. Fix-It Minister. What's his face?
Figile.
I forgot his name. Figile
Mbalula. Yeah, this goes in or ties directly with what Gabriel was saying, that the level of ineptitude here it's so brazen and it's so thick in layers that, again, perhaps we do need to manage our expectations, and that it is a good idea to say maybe scrap the fuel levy at certain sectors of the economy, as a way of actually growing the economy, spurring job creation in the private sector, etc. But the reason that's not happening is because the people in political office that would be essentially responsible for tabling this in parliament, etc., don't have the necessary aptitude or understanding of economics to actually, firstly incept this sort of policy or make changes to the current policy that could actually allow this. It's up to private sector players and even some think tanks to basically put out this framework, present it to these ministers or government bodies, etc. I know that there are groups within parliament, portfolio committees and the like. It's up to private sector and the think tanks to actually table this. And we do know how government's attitude is, particularly when presented with information they don't necessarily co-sign or haven't sponsored. Experts come in, give them solid advice that would absolutely work, not just from outside our borders, but even from within. But that advisory is typically ignored right off the bat because it doesn't come from state players. It doesn't come from people who are in bed with the government. So the aptitude required to actually come out with things like this is it's just not there in government. And even though they say they're pro-poor and pro-Africa and pro-blacks, etc., we don't actually see that materialize in policy. Instead, what we see is, again, yet another means for government to actually find creative ways to line up their own pockets by making small little amendments to policy, that at the end of the day actually contribute to worsening unemployment. And again, it goes into what you were saying right at the beginning of this conversation, and that the net effect is that me and you end up now with potentially a lower living standard or quote unquote walking away with less money at the end of the month from our hard-earned incomes. It's not a very good thing to see. But at the end of the day, we do need to now start asking ourselves and perhaps look within and say, right, is this the kind of government we want to take us forward? Everything goes back to our own actions when it's time to actually queue up and go and vote. Unfortunately, That's where it is. But the majority that do vote for this ruling party are people who don't have maybe as keen an understanding of where policy is actually dragging us in terms of worsening me and yours lives.
That being said, we're seeing a worsening of our time available on the show. Welcome to it. If you've just joined us, we've hit that 1 hour mark on the show.
It's all getting worse.
It is 9 p.m. It's been worse. It's been absolutely terrible for me. It's been absolutely terrible. It is 9 o'clock. Welcome to it, Liberty and Friends, your 90-minute Sunday evening premier Well, I don't know if it's premium at this stage, given the quality of the show. But welcome to it. It is Liberty and Friends. Hit that like button, please. Make sure you keep my engagement over 50%. We're nowhere near it tonight. I don't know what's going on. Maybe we have a lot of shadow viewers, people who want to view but not hit the like button. Hit it. Make sure you hit it right now. Welcome to it. My name is Tiken Gobesa. I'm in conversation with Martin from Staden from the Free Market Foundation. Phume, Mashigo, who's co-host of the Burning Platform. You know what it is out there in the Burning Platform. Ernst van Sale from AfriForum. Shout out to you, Ernst. Good to see you. Also the host of Concious Caracal. Make sure you check out his stuff online and like and subscribe, please, to his channel. Now, Gabriel Crouse from the Institute of Race Relations. You've also seen him. He writes a lot on the Daily Friend, and of course his podcast, which is Two Crickets in a Thorntree. That's him and Unik Larma outside in that part of the world. And there he is, last but not least, Koketso Resane, who has been a wonderful co-host tonight on the show, but he also co-hosts the Manpatria podcast. Make sure you find them on their social media, like and subscribe on their channel. Good evening, welcome to it. This is Liberty and Friends. Guys, I'm going to move us on to a chap who right now is living his best life. He doesn't really care what's happening in the country. He wasn't really in it for that. He was in it for the prestige. And the prestige, of course, is being able to say, I'm the president of South Africa. And right now, his prestige is taking his ass all over West Africa. And a lot of South Africans are wondering, what is he doing there? Well, at a cursory glance, he is striking up bilateral agreements with various West African countries. He's done a successful visit of Nigeria, Ivory Coast, I believe he's just done. And he's currently in Ghana. And, he'll be using this visit, according to the DIRCO, that's the Department of International Relations, to enhance bilateral relations based on good governance and rules based on multilateralism. This is, of course, the official line. But the question I wanted to ask, Martin, let me come to you and then Gabriel. Martin, you were on this show when we were having that conversation around the Africa Free Trade zone. I might be butchering its full name here, but effectively the promulgation of an agreement between all 52 African countries that, hey, we're going to establish a free trade zone in order to boost intra-Africa trade. Is this maybe some of the beginning fruits of this? Do you see this visit by Cyril as going to benefit ordinary entrepreneurs, or is this going to be more of the same, which is big corporates riding on the coattails of the state signing these big deals?
Yeah, no, look, I think the AFTA, it's the African Continental Free Trade Area. I think on paper it's actually a very worthy agreement. I think one of the biggest points of agreement is that something like 90% of trade barriers should be taken down over a certain period. There's also talk of a continental passport and all these nice things that I think are pretty worthy. I think its biggest pitfall is that very few African countries besides South Africa have their own tax bases that are of any notable description. And the result of that is that customs and fees that get levied on things that come over borders are most African governments' main source of income. So I'm a bit pessimistic about these African governments actually following through in practice with what the agreement says. The fact that it's gotten to this point is actually quite astounding to me. That we are at the point where most of Africa, all of Africa perhaps, have agreed to this. But I'm very, very concerned that it's probably not going to be implemented in the type of speed that you would want, simply because it will be impossible for these governments to continue to function to the extent that they do function, and that's not saying much. So it's their only source of revenue. So yeah, I whenever Cyril is doing something, I know it's usually not going to reap any good fruit. So that's my reading of what the president is doing right now. I'm glad he's out of the country, that he can't address us and worsen lockdown and stuff. So please keep doing that, Mr. President. Stay there, do your thing. Don't come back. But I don't think it's gonna implement the free trade area for us anytime soon, unfortunately.
Well, Gabriel, I want to have you jump in here because there's two things here at issue. Number one, wait, wasn't the president meant to be speaking today at 8 anyway? I'm not sure. In any event, Gabriel, it should be a source of shame to us as Africans that it's easier for me to take a flight to London or, Australia even. Sorry, I'm still recovering from the spicy cough. Or even to the US, than it is for me to ship something from, let's say, here in Johannesburg to South Sudan. And that actually it's taken, for example, an effective, and I'm going to be cheeky here, recolonization by the Chinese for them to build these roads. And by the way, these roads are magnificent that they're building across the continent. It's taken a recolonization of the Chinese for there to be actual links, road links, stronger ones, quality ones between African nations. But again, not for the purpose of African nations, but rather for the extractive purpose of Chinese government.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, to get a little bit granular, if you speak to anyone in the export-import industry in South Africa, you'll hear the same complaint. Breitbart Bridge. Okay, it's a nightmare getting your stuff from Durban through the N3, which is blockaded some of the time, up to Breitbart Bridge bordering on Zimbabwe. But then it's really a nightmare. And we saw this play out like a few weeks ago where the new payment for the bridge there was this funny agreement, which basically resulted in logistics, proper business logistics being arrested for days and days. And the cost of keeping your truck on the side of the road with your truck driver inside of it is very inconvenient for the person who's doing the job because they know that they're not adding any value. They're just sitting tight. And it's extremely inconvenient for the customers on the other end of it because the costs have gone up because of all of the resources that have to be expended in keeping this person going. And it's just a nightmare. Now, the Breitbart Bridge calamity of a few weeks ago was just the latest unit in a long-standing story, and Magnus Haystack has some good data on this too. Part of our problem is as Martin describes it, that there's this over-promising which is unlikely to be delivered upon at an actual policy level in African governments across the continent. But part of it is just straight boring. Are the people on the ground actually implementing the rules properly? Do they have the right infrastructure to do it? Are the very little bylaw kind of rules actually reasonable? And the answer is no, no, no. And the upshot of that is that we sell ourselves. South Africa is the gateway to Africa, this like well-developed economy in terms of finance. And our banking sector is the best on the continent by a long stretch. That's important. We have relatively good infrastructure still, but it's not translating into the kinds of multiplier effects that it should have in terms of growing our own prosperity and helping goods get to markets across the continent because the basics are not being met. So I think that I just want to agree with Martin. Like, I think it's a good idea, but implementation is a problem on this front. And I don't think the implementation is just a matter of getting other African leaders to actually forego their revenue streams for the benefit of their people. It's also, can we get our own border management in line with what actually makes sense, which is that a truck should not be on average spending 8 hours and on a bad day 3 days trying to get through a border. That is crazy.
Absolutely. And I see Usam Monkwe basically saying, hey, Gabriel, it's Bait Bridge and then Breitbart. I think you made our border crossing sound a bit too based. Gabriel.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Sam. I clearly am suffering from December.
There you go.
December
Ernst
probably.
hitting you with righteous indignation there. But guys, let me come to the rest of the panel here, because I think there is a very sharp conversation to be had here. On the one hand, it seems as though the government, in this case Cyril, is forging ahead, but not really having taken South Africans into his confidence as to really who are these deals for. And I say this because Phume, in the past, we have seen the likes of Abo Mbeki gallivanting across Africa, striking these so-called deals, and then what we then find out a year or two later, via exposés, for example, let's say by Amapungane or whatever, is that actually these deals that we've been talking about is cadres developing, or rather benefiting from illicit contracts all over Africa, whether it's in Congo involving gold and diamonds or whatever, or Burundi or whatever the case may be, often with South African government being used as a conduit for them to benefit off of private deals. Like, do you feel as though we're going down the same pathway? Does a president in West Africa realistically come back, and entrepreneurs in this country see some benefit from that?
First, I want to say this is the nicest panel I've ever been on, because everybody is in violent agreement. So, I've also not been on a panel with this many people who don't trust Cyril, and I love it.
Wait till
Really,
my
I
speaking turn on your double down on that opinion.
Look, I think Africa's biggest, we are our own worst enemy. African governments across the board have let the people of Africa down. It's a great idea to have a single passport for Africans. It's a great idea to have the idea that says we can move people and goods across borders very quickly and use, a monetary system that is easy to translate across the board. Wonderful idea. That's what we need, right? All these people that could be for small businesses, for big businesses, that could be customers, that could be clients, that could be partners. It's a great idea. The Bait Bridge debacle that Gabriel talks about is just one small indication of what goes wrong. What goes wrong is that the governments are corrupt. The people at the tolls are corrupt. Everybody wants a piece of the pie that's outside of the agreements, that's outside, that's extracurricular. Everybody wants a piece of the pie, and that's what makes it so difficult for everybody. Listen, we don't know what Cyril is doing because nobody tells us nothing. If you're lucky, if you see like a live from Cyril's presidential Twitter feed that says, hey, ceremonial garb in Ghana or Cote d'Ivoire. But Cyril doesn't take us into his confidence, partly because, and this is where I don't trust Cyril comes to play, partly because Cyril does what's best for Cyril. Most of the time, everything that we see Cyril do, all the policies that Cyril pushes through are policies that work for Cyril. IPPs work for Cyril and his friends and his family. So we have to watch that Cyril very carefully. Every time you see him do something, you have to watch him very carefully to see how does he benefit, how do his comrades benefit, and how is that going to fuck you over? Am I allowed to say that? Sorry.
Hey, F-bomb on the BBL show. Well, welcome back.
It's late, man. It's a Sunday night, guys. It's late.
Welcome to it. I think Koketso, I saw a lot of head shaking early on, and likely on the issue of a one passport or Africa. I'm not sure where he's, but jump in there, Koketso. Where do you disagree?
Yeah, it's quite the dream. Only in a utopian world will we ever realize the dream of having one Africa with one passport and one currency. And I really don't expect this to be coming out of Africans, but it is. So you have to kind of look where the agenda is, because let's be honest, right? We know as people of this continent that there is a remarkable difference between Southern Africans in the East, Africans in the West, and definitely Africans in the North as well. So yeah, we should be the first to say this is not going to work. So once you hear Africans themselves saying these things, you have to ask yourselves, why are they doing this? And I'm going to point squarely at the likes of a Julius Malema, etc. It's people who want to enable a scenario where they've got this massive landmass with potentially most of the world's resources, with them at the helm, able to be called, I don't know, emperor or the Swahili equivalent of the word emperor or something like that. So yeah, it's definitely never going to work, because even we as Africans can't come down to actually agree. In a lot of countries, they can't even come to agree on what is a standard national languages, because the cultures are just too diverse, too different, too left from right, etc., etc. So it's never going to work. But going back now into this conversation, right? And I always bring this up because people, I don't know, some people maybe it's easy to forget, and I don't blame them. But does everyone remember the junk status we are currently in as a country, right?
Double junk. We got
Double junk, right? This has actually made life very difficult for the government, for a government who inherited effectively infrastructure that works, state organs that worked. And yes, I hear the argument that, right, they might have worked for a minority population, but at the end of the day, I'm going to write that off, because it's leftist nonsense. Because a working power station that maybe is producing at a certain capacity is a working power station. If you end up with a power station that same power station producing half of what it used to in the past, that's squarely on you. At the very least, you should have maintained and serviced it, at the very least. And then you can start having conversations around building additional capacity and the likes. And you can rinse and repeat the scenario for the road network, the telecommunication network. Heck, we went from 2 SABC channels to 3 SABC channels. So you're supposed to actually build on top of what is already there, and the government didn't do that. Going back into that junk status now, the reason it's so significant is because government almost had this grand idea that, listen, things are kind of a mess right now, but we will actually take on a little bit more debt because we can afford to, and take on a little bit more debt so that we can actually address some of these issues in lieu of our growing population and the competing demands of particularly the poor, who really expect more out of the ANC, which has promised them wonderful things, but has only delivered for those who happen to be in the elite sectors of society. They can't take up those loads. And when we go back to what we mentioned earlier with the trains and the like, a typical example here, the reason you find so many trucks on the road is because government failed to secure some loaning where they could actually, fix up the rail system, at the very least for cargo, if not for passengers. The assumption was made that they can actually approach the private banking sector, get a little bit of money, and maybe fix what they failed to maintain over time. Banks immediately said, nope, it's not in their interests as a business to do that, because a government that has failed to maintain what they inherited and worked cannot be trusted to actually take what is broken, fix it, and then over and above that, create additional capacity. The banks refused, and that's why now, and that's why we found ourselves in the situation where we're in. In fact, the banks then came out and said it actually benefits them to have more trucks on the road, because rail becomes a national competency. But me having a small business that does logistics and trucking across the country, that's not a national competency. So it made more sense for the banks to say, right, we will finance Koketso, small trucking agency, for him to then deliver coal from point A to the power station, something that was actually done by the rail. All of this is created by a scenario where the government is unable to actually source capital to fix or address the infrastructure challenges that we have in the country. This is just in South Africa's case. If you go elsewhere on the continent, the situation a lot of the time is a hell of a lot worse. There are rare examples where there's been market improvements, but again, the argument can be made to say that, right, if you're starting off from something that's not in great shape, the only way forward is actually an improvement. So that argument can be made. But I've just mentioned South Africa's case. If you rinse and repeat this across the African continent, it's a complete mess. So we're not going to get to a point where you can unite Africa even at a trade bloc level. Never mind grand ideas of single passport and the likes, but you won't even get to a point where we can say, right, let's have a unified trading bloc. And kudos to Thabo Mbeki, who was probably best positioned to try. He did try. Unfortunately, he couldn't complete his project. He realized halfway through that it was a lot bigger than he initially thought, but he left some semblance of a framework in place for those after him to actually pick up and move it forward. No one did that, and certainly in his absence from South African government, he couldn't champion it. And that framework he left behind with NEPAD and the likes, that was completely ignored as well. And even at an African Union level, what has the AU done to actually further the economic interest of Africans on the continent? Diddly squat. So again, we need to manage our expectations. The solution is not going to come from our government. It needs to come from us. And for us to actually do this, we need to empower ourselves. Start small, start at the basic family business, scale them up, and then potentially build something that can benefit not just you and your community, but the continent at large. Unfortunately, again, policies are preventing us from doing a lot of that. And there's a hell of a lot of red tape that prevents us from starting out small businesses, which can then become successful. I can't wait to have the next Elon Musk coming out of South Africa, of course. But as we've seen in the past and even at present, our best minds tend to leave and then go and make it big elsewhere, only for half of South African Twitter to remind the Americans and the Europeans at every opportunity that that guy is actually South African and went to the same high school that I went to. I'm going to stop talking.
Guys, let me just pause everybody for a moment. Can you guys hear me properly? Okay, I just have to change all of that. Okay, folks, I'm a little pressed for time, but I wanted to remind everybody here of what the African utopia looks like. When politicians, on the one hand, claim that they want to build a one Africa, but then when they are in one space, kind of look like this.
Joining the house. I'm joining the house. Point of order. Point of order. I'll kill you outside. I'll kill you. I'll kill you. Point of order.
I just thought I should remind everybody of what exactly, a one Africa looks like when they, for example, sit at the African Parliament, as that scene was. And guess who was the African MP who was threatening to kill another African MP? The very guy who claims that we should be building a one Africa of no borders and that we're all brothers in this continent. So be careful of what politicians say versus what they claim they want to do. Guys, pardon me for that little detour. We're pressed for time. I must move us to our last topic. And before I do that, a reminder to you, dear viewer, hit that like button, please. Everybody here is, sorry, I'm hearing feedback of myself. Let me do this for a moment. Hit that like button. Make sure, please, that you are keeping my engagement over 50%. And to the Jewish community, happy Hanukkah on what is the final evening of Hanukkah. I had to throw that in there. I'm going to move us to an issue here that is perhaps a bit of a sticky one. South Africans, of course, will know that the president came out basically saying he's looking, he's exploring, exploring the possibility, of introducing a vaccine mandate. Of course, the establishment, who have now come to broadly call them, and who do I mean by the establishment? I'm talking, of course, about the corporate media, politicians, the ANC government itself, big pharma and corrupted parts of the medical fraternity clapped like seals. When the president suggested this, because it's wonderful, they said, of course we need to use force to jab the South Africans who are refusing to take this vaccine, is what they effectively have been telling us. And we're seeing the messaging in the mainstream media in particular that is all one way. There's not been a single journalist in this country who's actually questioned this particular policy proposal by the president. It's all in support. And then you take what the establishment is saying, and you contrast it to the backlash that you're hearing and seeing from ordinary South Africans who questioned two things. Number one, the president flip-flopping on this issue, because this is the same president who just a few months ago had said there is no way in hell, effectively he suggested, that a vaccine mandate would be introduced. Why? Because a voluntary way of doing this is much more preferable, and we agreed with him in that regard. Now I'll play you something to that particular end. In fact, let me play you that so you'll see exactly what the delicious irony and hypocrisy was from Cyril Ramaphosa.
But I want to be clear. Nobody will be forced to take this vaccine. I want to repeat, nobody will be forced to take this vaccine. Nobody will be forbidden from traveling to wherever they want to travel to, including from enrolling at school, or from taking part in any public activity if they have not been vaccinated. Nobody will be given this vaccine against their will. Government has set up a task team that will undertake broad consultations on making vaccination mandatory for specific activities and locations. That is, to make vaccinations compulsory for certain locations and certain activities.
Day and night.
Every time I watch that, it makes me giggle. But again, as I said, that first bit is the hypocrisy of that moment. And then, of course, the second bit that we definitely saw in terms of the backlash is that ordinary South Africans just do not take kindly from the suggestion that the state is going to force them to do something. We saw this in the people writing into newspapers, especially on talk radio. People calling in on this topic have been absolutely clear that they will not accept any situation where the state either A, forces them to take this vaccine, or B, creates a segregated society along medical lines, along vaccination status. But of course, the corporate media just ignore this and say, well, the people support this, so Cyril must do it. Phume, I'm going to come to you first because I've never really heard your view on this issue. Firstly, vaccine mandates, where do you sit on this, yay or nay?
Look, I think that people in certain businesses are going to need need their people to take vaccines, whether it's in healthcare. I do think that people should be allowed to decide if they want to take the vaccine or not. But similarly, on the flip side of that, then things like right of admission reserved, people should be allowed to exercise that too. And I think that there's going to be, for a very long time, a lot of discussion around this particular issue. I'm still struggling to figure out why it is that vaccines have become so political. I'm
That's a
trying
good
to
question.
figure out why vaccines have become so political. And a lot of the rhetoric that we hear on either side of the debate comes from a political point of view, and people who couldn't pass biology in standard 8 have an opinion about what vaccines should and should not be doing. I'm just like, I don't know. We should be skeptical, and we should let people who know more actually do the talking about what is right and what is wrong. But people should be allowed to take the vaccine if they want to. People should be allowed to not take the vaccine if they don't want to. But similarly, people should be allowed to decide if they will let unvaccinated people into their business premises, into their operating premises, as and when they feel like.
I would genuinely agree with both of those points. Martin, let me come to you because I can see you, agreeing that, because for me, there's two things at play here. Number one is our freedom as South Africans to choose, the freedom to choose. The idea that I want to take something or I don't want to take something. But there's also the rights that we South Africans have. And one right that we've developed as humanity, not just South Africans. Sorry, I'm just hearing feedback. One right we've developed as humanity is the right to refuse medical treatment. And it stands in therefore, the suggestion by the state and the establishment that they're going to ram through this vaccine mandate because they're seeing it being done in other parts of the world. And in fact, they're bold, they're brazen, Martin, in how they describe it. They say, look, your freedom is contingent on you accepting me jabbing you by force with this vaccine. It then begs the question, what about that right that I've spoken about, the right to refuse medical treatment, and of course our freedoms, God-given, by the way, not state-given. Our freedoms don't come from the state. They're given to us by God or natural freedoms if you don't believe in God. What about those two elements then when a state really says, look, this is what we want to do?
Yeah, look, the whole concept of freedom and rights flies right out the window when you can just say, but the public interest, the interest of all the other people, that overrules your individual right. That is the negation of the whole theory of rights that, I mean, to an extent, the whole Western legal tradition is really what sets it apart from everything else. This is what we should be proud of, is the recognition of the individual and their very, very fundamental and inalienable right to what is often referred to as self-ownership. Now, up until about 2 minutes ago, I thought that patient self-determination was the central pillar of the medical industry. That seems to be gone out the window now. If you when you see so many experts, and I say that as a compliment to them, experts in the medical field, top of their class, falling in line with a very, very authoritarian and unacceptable policy decision that they really have no business supporting. They need to get out of that very quickly, because that very much contributes to the problem that Phume pointed out, and that is a politicization of this issue. Everyone, when you talk about vaccines now, think you're talking about politics rather than medicine, and that has done the greatest disservice to the vaccination campaign than any anti-vaxxer could ever do. And it's an anti-vaxxer's wet dream what these politicians have achieved in destroying the case for this vaccine in particular. So that is a huge problem. But moreover, I've said on TV and radio a lot about vaccine mandates in the last week. So I invite everyone to go on my website and check that out. But specifically here, it's insane to me that President Ramaphosa could sit now in November during his address and so brazenly just say that with no awareness that it directly contradicts what he said just a few months ago. And this guy, from what I hear, has a huge approval rating in South Africa, and it just blows my mind that this guy could sit there doing this. He's not giggling like I got you, or he's not like saying, oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. None of that. He's just saying, yeah, we're investigating that, as if it's the most casual thing in the world for him to contradict the policies of his own self-administration a few months ago. And now I've pointed out this, and then people have said, no, but you see, Martin, the president said that in good faith, and it's because these bloody citizens have not vaccinated in large scale that the president was now forced to reverse that position. Shame, you can't blame him. Blame the people who aren't getting vaccinated. Now, my issue here is, and I don't want to get too academic, you cannot give someone a choice. You can't say you can choose this. But if you make the wrong choice, I'm going to force you to make the right choice. That is per definition not a choice. And that means that that means you cannot say that Ramaphosa was being sincere in February. If what he said was you have a choice, but what he meant was you have a choice, but you have to pick the right choice, otherwise we're going to force it to you, it means he was lying from the start. It means this was a lie from the very beginning. This guy has lied to us, and some of my colleagues have said lying is a very strong word, be careful. I think it's a very fair word here. He lied to us. Hy het gelieg. And the
Gejok.
It's gejok, hy het gelieg, and we need to be very aware of that. He's not engaging in good faith in this issue. And just last point from me on this, I am not anti-vax. I think the vaccine is probably going to keep you out of the hospital. I think it's probably going to keep you from dying. So by all means, if you're in a high-risk category, please get vaccinated by choice. I am not anti-vax, But what is happening now with the politicization of this issue and it being hinged on your freedom being hinged on you getting vaccinated, that is despicable. It is unforgivable. And really, if this and EWC, these are really the two issues of our time in South Africa, pay very close attention, and we're going to have an opportunity to vote again in a few years, make the right choice there. But in the meantime, start ignoring the assurances that these bloody people give you on television. They're always going to be lying to you. Please just start ignoring them in that respect. Do not trust them with your freedom. I'm begging you.
Adam, let me come to you, because I must be frank here. I'm stupefied at how the mainstream media, and really the corporate media is what I mean by this, has been goading this on. And even in a tone-deaf way, given the country we live in. Here's I can't think of this guy's name right now. He's with News 24. Sorry?
Adrian
No, it wasn't Adrian, the other one.
Mandy Wiener.
It's a terrible way of describing it.
Peter Dutoy.
Yes, Peter Dutoy, that's one. I said it because I had an engagement with that chap online, and I just told him straight up, hey, for sake. Because the tweet he basically put out was, well, and he tagged all of these companies, Woolworths, all of the retailers. He said, maybe it's time you guys start discriminating effectively between the vaxxed and the unvaxxed, and don't let the unvaxxed in your doors. And then went a step further to say, even those South Africans who are on social grounds, if they're unvaxxed,
that was just to say this, that was Peter Louis Meiberg from Daily Maverick. That wasn't from News 24. Just
okay, sorry, I got them crissed up. Maybe I did a little racist thing.
All these guys look the same. These white guys.
I just wanted to make sure you get that correct.
Right, yeah, no, we all make mistakes.
Either way, I had my great time saying, hey, Fusek Peter. Anyway, but let me come to you, dude. Because for me, there's something super tone deaf about that, where this man is basically saying, I enjoy a very privileged life. Screw those poor people unless they do what I and the elites want them to do.
Right. No, Sikhle, well, firstly, I just want to add there, Cyril Ramaphosa, this is not the first time he's been caught in a blatant lie. I mean, this is the same president that in 2018 went on a public platform in New York City and said, and I quote, there are no murdering of white farmers in South Africa, and the media covered for them. There was no controversy around that blatant lie because, of course, Cyril is the next coming of Jesus for the ANC, and they can do nothing wrong. So, when it comes to these vaccine mandates and his lie, and I think I agree with Martin when he says that this was a lie. I mean, there's no way you can really excuse him from this. This was a blatant lie when he said that nobody would be forced. Of course, they're going to be forced now. That's what they're talking about. That's the whole definition of a mandate. So the thing here is, Sikhle, what you're touching on there, it's something that gets me really riled up because it shows this disconnect that you showed there. I mean, this whole thing about Peter Louis Meiberg saying that people shouldn't be allowed in taxis. So his mindset is, oh, you're just going to have to drive to work. Tough luck, buddy. I'm like, have you any idea what the average South African has to do to get from A to Z or A to B? It's not just, oh man, it's bad luck. I'm just going to have to climb in my own car and drive there now. No, dude, it's actually sickening seeing it. And I mean, I'm not the biggest supporter of let's get everyone that's struggling on a social grant. I think people need to get empowered to be able to support themselves. But at the same time, you can't just cut off social grants. You've got a huge portion of the population now dependent on them, and you can't just flick a switch and now everything's going to be fine. That's absolutely evil, and I'll call it evil because that's what it is. And there's another thing that's definitely needs some attention, and that's the thing that, I mean, firstly, let's get it out of the way. I don't care if you're vaccinated or not. That's not my problem. That's your choice. But for some reason, the whole concept of medical privacy has just been thrown out the window. Nobody even cares about that anymore. Just 2 years ago, it was a major thing. You have your right to medical privacy. Nobody's going to ask you about these things. Now suddenly it's like, no, everything needs to be completely transparent. It's absolutely ludicrous. And the thing is, here's the thing that needs to stop. So there's this, I mean, we've even used the word here tonight on this podcast, anti-vax. Stop using that word. That's a weasel word to try and just absolutely sideline anyone that's hesitant or skeptical about what's going on around them. Stop doing that. If you're completely writing off people and saying, oh, they're just stupid or they don't know what's going on, they're just hard-headed, they're just stubborn, you are the bad guy. I'm looking you in the eye. You are the bad guy. You're not the good guy in this situation. You are not. Don't hide behind empathy and saying, I'm caring about the community around me. No, you're not. If you don't have any empathy for anyone that has a little bit of hesitation with this vaccine, then you are not the guy that is on the side of empathy. You're on the side of forcing down medical procedures on people because that'll make you feel nice. You'll be able to say, well, I'm doing it for the greater good. But stop that. The thing that needs to stop is this dehumanization of your fellow man in your country. This whole thing of writing off millions of South Africans, 70% of the country, writing them off as idiots, writing them off as terrible people, writing them off as selfish. No, man, that needs to stop. This is not the way to do it. This is not the way to really, if you want to see more people get vaccinated, stop dehumanizing people for their own personal choice. And this is something that really gets me pissed off, because this is something that people have this whole superiority complex around this. They go off and say, well, I'm doing the right thing. I'm this incredible person. You're this terrible person. No, you're not. No, you're not. What you're doing is you're trying to dehumanize people. You're pretty much being shameless. What you're doing is disgusting, and you need to fucking stop it. And I mean, we've already dropped the F-bomb on this episode tonight, so I'm going to do it once, because that's what they deserve. These people that want to try and take away people's constitutional rights, these people that want to force things on other people, these people that want to dehumanize other people because they're not acting as they want them to act, it's shameful, it's disgusting, and you need to stop. It's something that needs to be called out because it's evil.
And I must come to you, Gabriel, because we're running over time here, and my apologies to you guys in that regard. But I mean, Ernst is absolutely right, Gabriel. I mean, you almost have the smug elite of people. You almost imagine them speaking them with their eyes closed, like, oh, how dare you unvaxxers besmirch our vax blood with your refusal to listen to us. And at the same time, a tone-deaf approach in a country where really we have bigger problems, Gabriel.
We really do. So if you look at Ipsos, an international pollster, asking people around the world, how much do you think COVID's a priority issue? South Africa's throughout had a lower average answer of this is a priority issue to pretty much every other country that they polled. Most people, I mean, by now, twice as many people say unemployment is a priority issue, for example. So I just want to say something about the politics, and then I want to say something about the medical evidence. So about the politics, there is this delicate matter, which is that on the one hand, there's force, and we all understand the image of a policeman like holding someone down and forcing a jab into their arm. And I think everyone kind of sees that and is like, oh, that's gross. They recoil. That's not a good idea. And when I say everyone, I'm not including Adrian Basson. But let me get to that.
Peter Louis Myberg, sorry.
Or Peter Louis Myberg, Mandy Wiener, or whatever. There are some people who think it's a good idea, but it's clearly crazy. So, but then the argument is no, we're not saying force, we're saying nudge. This nice word, which comes from a nice old Princeton economist who won the Nobel Prize for it. This is how nice countries nudge their people. They're like, if you want to take the subway or actual public transport, then you have to be vaccinated. We don't have public transport. See, I'm going to call you out a little bit. Taxis in this country, that is not public transport. That is private transports. There are no trains. There are no trains that are taking people to work anymore. It's all private transport. So the government doesn't have the capacity to say, we're offering you a service, we're going to deny it unless you get vaccinated. And if you don't want that service, you can use an alternative. Because they're not offering the service in the first place, because corrupt useless administrators have overseen the complete dilapidation of those services. So what's left is what Adrian Basson recommended, which is deny people their SASSA grants unless they get vaccinated. He is the editor of the largest newspaper in this country. And that is an evil recommendation. I don't use that word lightly. That is exactly what it is, because it's the same. If you say to someone, we have 12 million people at least on the breadline or below, who we have 27 million South Africans on grants right now. If you deny people grants, firstly, you don't have the capacity to vaccinate fast enough. Secondly, you don't have the admin to make sure that people aren't selling their status.
Third F-bomb, yay!
On the sideline. Like there's a black market in like illegal vaccination, in fake vaccination cards in Greece, which is super huge because the Greeks, which haven't done anything worth commending in the last since Aristotle, have decided to pass this thing. There's already a huge market in fake vaccine cards there. South Africa, biggest black market in vaccine cards, coming to you as soon as we mandate that stuff. We don't have the capacity to administrate it, but insofar as you do, you're telling people die of starvation or get vaccinated. That is like a policeman holding someone down on the ground and forcing a jab into the arm, and that is evil. That's a policy.
Absolutely.
On the I want to say something about the medical side, and if I can toot my own horn, my piece on this came out yesterday on News 24. Go check it out. I'm glad they published it. There's very good reason to suspect that Omicron is a mouse rather than a monster. And you're seeing this from Richard Friedland, the head of Netcare. You're seeing this from the NICD, the National Institute of Communicable Diseases report on swine hospitals. The level of patients coming in but not needing oxygen or anything for the new variant. It does look like it's milder. Why? Why would we have a new variant that's milder? On the one hand, people are like, well, it's inevitable. This thing evolves and it becomes milder because it's stupid to kill the host. That is nonsense. Salim Karima said it, and I can cite you 30 virologists who say that's nonsense. That is true for something that kills 20% of the people it infects. This thing only kills 0.1 or 0.2% of the people it infects, and it differs by age. This is not in the zone where the virus is going to naturally evolve to become milder. And you can see that because Delta was not milder. Delta was more deadly than Alpha. Beta was more deadly than Alpha. And Alpha was more deadly than the original thing that quite possibly came out of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So if the virus has been evolving to become more deadly, how come this time some are saying it's become milder? There's a very simple hypothesis to answer this question. It's just a hypothesis. We don't know for sure because we don't have all the information yet. But this is the hypothesis that attracts me. This is the hypothesis that attracts people like Trevor Bedford, a Harvard PhD, a MacArthur Genius Grant recipient, a legitimate expert. The hypothesis is the following. If society downloads an antivirus, then the virus needs to get around the antivirus. But the virus has two options. As it's updating through evolution all the time, it can either up its bit rate, its ability to photocopy itself more quickly, and that makes it more deadly, or it can up its ability to dodge your antivirus. If everyone has antivirus, or most people have antivirus, then the one that wins is going to be the one, from a virus point of view, is going to be the one that dodges the antivirus, even if it means its bit rate goes down, even if it means it becomes more clunky, less effective at killing people. This is exactly what seems to have happened. Discovery estimated that 80% of South Africans had the virus by mid-August. If you've recovered, as Sihle and I have recovered, you have even better protection than someone who's been vaccinated. So our vaccination numbers are low, but our recovery numbers, if Discovery is right, is the highest in the world, which means this is the hardest place in the world for the virus to grow. So for it to grow here, it has to find a way of dodging the antivirus. But to do that, it has to become more useless at killing people. That's actually very good news. That is exactly what happens. 1918 flu, like go back through history. E5110 coronavirus. This is how coronavirus, respiratory viruses naturally tend to behave. They infect lots of people, and most people develop a new immunity, and then it is trying to deal with that, and in the process, it becomes more weak. So my final metaphor, and this is the metaphor I use in the News 24 article, is imagine if everyone is being attacked, everyone's being invaded by criminals or bears or whatever. They put up burglar bars. Now the bear can't get back in. You've locked your door. The bear doesn't know how to get back in. So the bear becomes a mouse, which can crawl through the cracks. And it can eat the cheese in your kitchen, but it is much less likely to kill you. That is
It's a mouse at the end of the day.
It's a mouse at the end of the day. All of the evidence so far points to that. If you look at the 32 cardinal mutations in the receptor binding domain that have been identified, the only ones that we understand what they're doing, 90% of them are evasion mutations, not deadly mutations. If you look at the evolution in the N domain, same thing. If you look at the mutations that we don't currently understand, we don't currently understand them. But then if you look at the hospital data, if you look at the ratio of cases to severe effects, it's all at the moment lining up one way. And it's very good news if this is true, and it's going to take another week or two to figure out if it's true. If it's true, it means South Africa is in the same position that the United Kingdom was. And this is where I'm going to finish. Back to the politics. In August, the United Kingdom declared Freedom Day. No one talks about it here. They declared Freedom Day. They said you can be free to choose to get vaccinated or not vaccinated, free to go to a nightclub and kiss everyone that you can see, free to stay at home and drink a cup of tea. No restrictions, nothing, your choice. And what happened? There was a huge number of cases, more cases than we are having. And deaths, flat. 2.5 per million per day. In this country, that would put it not only behind TB and HIV, and it would put it way, way down the priority list. We might be in that world where we have cases going through the roof, but the deaths stay flat. And if we're in that world, it's not because vaccines have protected us. The reason the UK got that is because 80% of its population got vaccinated. If we have that, it's because 80% of us got infected and recovered. And Sihle, you and I, if someone tells you or me that we have to get vaccinated, even though we've already caught this thing and recovered, I can give you multiple studies that show we're more likely to be bedridden for several days. And it might even be the case that there's no positive benefit in terms of transmission, in terms of basic infection, and in terms of severity. We can't find anything. The first case where Omicron was published in a scientific journal was a South African study where they looked at 3 million people who got infected. Only 35,000 got reinfected. That is 1 in 100. So your odds of getting it's better than being vaccinated. I'm not saying you should go for it, because obviously you can get sick and you can die. But if it's already happened, I didn't want it to happen, but it already happened. 1 in 100 chance of getting reinfected. Deaths, 0 reported deaths. Internationally, your chance of dying is 1 in 10 million. So, yes, please get vaccinated if you want to get vaccinated. But in this country, to try and force someone to get vaccinated who's already recovered, it is so insane. There is no way to justify it. And the only way that anyone thinks it makes sense is because they ignore the possibility that most of us have already caught it and recovered, and therefore ignore the reason that the best brains in the business are considering that Omicron is milder. There's a whole universe of conversation that has just not begun to enter the mainstream, because in the mainstream, we're having a conversation about whether you should starve someone to death because they don't want to get vaccinated. That's how mad the mainstream has become.
And it's been hilarious and scary at the same time to watch, because in the mainstream or in the corporate media, all you're hearing is cases and deaths. They've even omitted that part of the information about recoveries. The fact that 94% plus of South Africans and 99% worldwide of those who've caught this thing have recovered. There's no conversation about natural immunity. But again, guys, we've absolutely run out of time. We're already in overtime here. I see Phume giggling away there in the corner. As I always do, I'm going to give everybody final word, please, not more than a minute. In that, tell us how we can find you and your work. Koketso, let's go to you, because I also didn't give you a chance to comment on this one.
So should I comment on this one or wrap up?
Do both, homie.
Okay, I'll be quick on the comment around Omicron, etc. Look, I mean, I don't know who
Or
mentioned it now,
mandatory
but
vaccines, actually.
yeah, just on that, again, someone mentioned already that not too long ago, medical privacy was a thing. I think it was Martin who said it, and and that's the hill I die on. If it comes to that, that's the hill I'm going to fight on. You aren't right now required to even disclose things like your HIV status. In fact, we see heavy campaigns from some of your life insurers, etc., who really market the fact that they don't need you to take an HIV test for you to take a policy with them. That's how far medical privacy has come, particularly in this country where HIV was basically, this was, I would say, a hotbed, this part of the world at the very least. And that's how serious the issue was. Now, all of a sudden, it takes a SARS to throw that all out of the window. And on top of that, it's a SARS that isn't the plague it was thought to be at the beginning. So you have to ask yourself these questions: why? How is it that we are willing to give a pass for something like this? But for things that don't have a vaccine, that effectively can chronically affect you long term, if not lifelong, and those are being ignored. So I'll leave it at that. It's just something to ponder about, and it's the hill I'm going to fight on until. But to wrap it up, Manpatria podcast. That's where you find me regularly. The podcast itself is done for the year, but Manpatria is still going strong. So have a look on our channel over there. But in terms of the podcast, I'll see you in the new year. In terms of myself personally, I do have some big plans for 2022. Don't have much to announce as yet, but keep an eye out for that. And failing that, I'll probably be back here before the end of the year. Hint, hint. And guys, great panel, great engagement with everyone. And as usual, find me on my Twitter timeline where, I promise to probably behave in the coming week, but gloves off the week after this coming one.
Shout out to Koketso and, of course, the Manpatria team. Martin, how do we find you guys?
Yeah, so just the last word from me. Number one, expropriation without compensation. Parliament is voting tomorrow, Tuesday. So that's going to be important. Keep an eye on that. The Constitution might be amended to take away property rights. So just on what Phume said earlier, private owners should be able to decide, right of admission reserved. I believe in that for vaccines, but I believe in that for everything else as well. So that is very important. We need to protect property rights in this country in all circumstances. So keep an eye on that. Very important. You can find my work. All my work is on my website. That's martinvanstaden.com. You can follow me on Twitter. That is at Martin_ASFL. And on Facebook, that's facebook.com/MartinVanStadenLiberty. You'll find it all there. But also, please look at the Free Market Foundation. I know Larselis has been posting the links to that in the comments, so please have a look at that. But also have a look at Sakeliga, another organization I'm involved with, which is radically anti-EWC and radically anti-vax mandates. We're doing some good work there. That's sakeliga.co.za. It's available in both Afrikaans and English. Please consider supporting these organizations in their work. They're really standing up for what's right at this stage. And always, please, even despite all of this, stay positive. Kill defeatism. Whatever you do, kill defeatism. We will prevail if we just try. Keep your chins up. Keep your eye on what the government is doing, but never succumb to cynicism or defeatism. Let's fight the good fight. Thanks, Sinclair.
Absolutely. Shout out to you guys out there at Sakeliga and, of course, at the Free Market Foundation. Another organization I am a big fan of, the Institute of Race Relations. Gabriel, final word from you, and how do we find you?
Final word from me. We are running a campaign to disband the Command Council and resist its egregious assaults on people's right to choose. This started just with lockdowns and that kind of stuff, but it looks like it could ramp up. We have, at this stage, over 13,000 petitions Please, if you are into it, go check it out, irr.org.za. It'll be the first thing you find. Sign on to our petition. We're also very worried about the expropriation bill thing. We'll be doing some work on that at IRR campaigns and on the Employment Equity Amendment Act, which would basically give the government the right to impose race quotas on every sector of private business, which has been passed by Parliament and is now before the National Council of Provinces. If you're interested in just reading up on some of the data about Omicron, the Daily Friend has some of our press releases, and News 24 has that article that was published yesterday. Like I said, it's early days and there's stuff to figure out. But the hardest thing in South Africa as a journalist is to tell a story where there's possibly good news. And it's possibly good news. It's not reason to be complacent, and that's why the editors don't want to touch it. But it's reason to reorient your thinking about what our possibilities are. And I think one of our biggest failures as a country over the last 30 years has been failing to see how good the best could be. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that you don't hit it. So look out for the good news. You'll see that on the Daily Friend and my piece on News 24 and at the IRR's website. Thank you, CK.
Awesome. Thank you, Brother Gabriel. And Ernst, another organization doing great work. In fact, you guys at AfriForum are looking to take the vax mandate to court, if I'm not mistaken. Final word?
Yeah. Sikle, thank you very much again for the conversation and for the platform. Always a great pleasure to join you here on your panels. AfriForum is taking on the vaccine mandates. AfriForum announced this week that if the government instate these vaccine mandates, we will be taking action and appropriate action and necessary action. So we are pretty much seeing what the government's move will be, because that will shape our counter strategy to them. So if you're not a member yet, become a member of AfriForum. If you're watching from abroad, become a friend of AfriForum by just Googling Friends of AfriForum. And that's our big fight against for civil rights in South Africa this month, and for the foreseeable future. And remember, you have a constitutional right to bodily autonomy. Remember that and use that in these types of debates. If anyone really tries to malign you as some crazy person, just point them to the Constitution. You have an absolute right to bodily autonomy. Then lastly, if you like my little COVID rant and some other related stuff regarding Cyril Ramaphosa and the ANC, you can follow me on Twitter. My name is Concious Caracal, or you can just type in my username Caracal. So that's at CONCARACAL. Or you can go to YouTube, where I do my interview show, where I interview also interesting guests about topics that are pertinent to our time. That's also Concious Caracal. You can type that into the YouTube search bar, go subscribe and go check it out. I'm also very, very appreciative of anyone that comes and takes part in the live conversation as well. But yeah, everyone else on the panel has been excellent as well. And Godspeed to everyone in this trying time where we're fighting against people that are trying to hide behind good intentions, but are really going to be remembered as the bad guys of history.
Absolutely. And last but not least, the prettiest on the panel, the fairest on the panel, and I say the smartest on the panel, Phume.
Thank you so much for having me on. This was a fun panel. It was fun. It was really fun to be on here. And I think my favorite thing about it all is everybody in one way or another is doing one of my favorite things. For those of you who listen to Cliff Central would have heard me say on the Burning Platform that each and every one of us can do something, volunteer, show up, sign the petitions. Sometimes it's just signing the petition. Sign a petition. Show up where you can. Volunteer your services. Koketso was talking earlier about the fact that we have a lot of people in a lot of positions who don't have what it takes. And we have a lot of people who are not in those positions, not standing up and saying, I have what it takes. So that's what I advocate for. I'm on all the social media platforms, but I don't rant. I'm not like Ernst here. I don't rant on my social media platforms. you'll see me and my cute kid. But I'm on all the social media platforms. Thank you for having me, Big Daddy Liberty.
Awesome, and thank you for being on. And even as I say that and I get rid of everybody on the screen, thank you for watching, dear viewer. Goodness me, let me just take these off because there is hectic feedback on them. But apologies once again for that awkward beginning of the show. I've just come out of load shedding and it knocked everything, as you could see, out of sync. But a big thank you once again to Koketso Resane, who is part of the Manpatria team, for holding it down. I had asked him to please hold it down just in case my stuff doesn't come back on time. With that being said, thank you very much for watching. This is, of course, the one show that I do that is long format, and you guys said you definitely like that stuff, so I appreciate you for hanging around. Thank you to the moderators once again for keeping the comments clean and classy. I see you, Moonchild. I see you, Lars Solis. And everybody, by the way, I see you guys. Thank you so much for doing that. Please hit that like button before you leave. And a reminder, I'll see you on Wednesday for the Big Daddy Liberty show. And yeah, guys, once again, thank you for watching. Super appreciated. And with that being said, as I always end, or how I always end the show, even if I have a bit of the tail end of a flu, never trust a commie.